Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're having a great day. We're continuing our little Minecraft adventure today with some more Reddit stories along the way. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's dive into the first story. Am I the a-hole for offering a frozen dinner to an uninvited guest at a dinner party? The person telling the story likes to host a nice dinner for old friends a couple of times a year. This time, they invited 5 people, 2 couples, and 1 single friend. They'd all known each other for around 15 years, and usually got together every few months. So this wasn't some random formal event. It was a small group of people who knew each other really well. For dinner, the host had planned filet mignon, a small lobster tail, and 2 side dishes for each guest. They spent over $300 on everything, and because the steaks and lobster tails were expensive, they bought exactly enough for the people who had been invited. 1 portion per person, no extras, which honestly makes sense. That's not exactly the kind of meal where you casually make 3 spare plates just in case. But when the single friend arrived, he wasn't alone. He'd brought his new girlfriend with him. The host had never met her, didn't know she existed, and hadn't been told she was coming. Still, the host tried to be polite about it. They weren't angry with the girlfriend. They were just suddenly dealing with 6 guests and only 5 portions of food, so the host pulled the friend aside and explained the situation. They said there wasn't any extra steak or lobster. And because each steak had been cooked to a different person's preferred doneness, it wasn't really something they could just cut up and divide evenly. The lobster tails were individual portions too, so they offered to heat up a frozen pizza or another frozen meal for the girlfriend instead. The friend immediately got upset. He accused the host of not liking his girlfriend. He also said the host was trying to embarrass them by offering her a frozen meal while everyone else ate steak and lobster. And after that, the 2 of them left. Yeah, no, that escalated really fast. The strange part is that the friend never offered to share his own meal with her. He didn't say, "Hey, I brought her without asking, so she can have half of mine." He didn't offer his steak, his lobster tail, or even one of his sides. Instead, he expected the host to somehow solve a problem that he had created. And that's kind of the part that gets me. If you bring someone uninvited, that person is your responsibility, you know? Later, another friend reached out to the host with some more context. Apparently, the man and his girlfriend had already been arguing before the dinner, so that might explain why he was already tense and reacted so quickly. But even with that explanation, the host was still left wondering whether they should have handled the food differently. Okay, honestly, I don't think the host did anything wrong here. Could they have split the food? Maybe, but they were caught off guard in their own home after spending a lot of money and planning the meal around 5 specific people. And they still tried to offer the girlfriend something to eat. It wasn't glamorous, sure, but it wasn't meant as an insult. It was just the only easy solution they had in that moment. And yeah, if the friend was so worried about his girlfriend feeling excluded, he could have shared his own plate. That would have solved the problem immediately. The girlfriend herself may not have even known she wasn't invited. She might have assumed everything had already been arranged. So I don't really blame her here. But the friend, nah, you don't show up with an extra person, give the host no warning, and then get angry because there isn't a 6th lobster tail waiting in the kitchen. But yeah, I'm curious what you think. Should the host have divided the meals between everyone, or was offering a frozen dinner completely reasonable? And would you ever bring someone to a dinner party without asking first? Okay, the next story is a quick one, but oh my god, it is so satisfying. It's from the pettyrevenge subreddit, and the title is, "Sorry, I'm just a typical woman." A long time ago, the woman telling this story worked as a receptionist at a law firm. She answered and transferred calls, greeted people when they arrived, and showed visitors to the correct meeting rooms. She'd only recently moved to the town, though, so she still didn't know the surrounding area very well. One day, a man called the office and asked her for directions from another part of town. From the moment she answered, he already sounded irritated. She politely explained that she wasn't familiar with that area yet, but asked him to hold for a moment so she could look up the directions on her computer. A completely normal solution, you know. She wasn't refusing to help him. She just needed a minute. But apparently that wasn't good enough for him. He suddenly shouted into the phone that she was a typical stupid woman who couldn't even give basic directions. And then he hung up before she had a chance to respond. Okay, that's a pretty intense reaction to someone offering to look it up for you. She was obviously annoyed, but assumed that would be the end of it, except around 20 minutes later, a man came bursting through the front doors of the law firm. He had the exact same distinctive voice, and he was clearly in a rush. He walked straight up to the receptionist and demanded to know where the interview room was, because he was already late for his interview. The second he spoke, she knew exactly who he was. Same voice, same angry tone, same person who had just yelled at her over the phone, and now he was standing directly in front of her, asking for help. So she looked at him and calmly said, "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm just a typical woman. I can't give directions." And apparently, he immediately realized what had happened. His face turned bright red and he just stood there for a moment, completely speechless. Eventually, he turned around and stomped off down one of the hallways to find the interview room himself. The receptionist never saw him again after that, so she assumed the interview probably didn't go particularly well. Honestly, yeah, I don't feel bad for him. You probably shouldn't scream insults at the first person you speak to when you're on your way to a job interview, especially when that person works in the exact office you're interviewing at. Like, even if she had never recognized his voice, being rude to the receptionist is already a terrible first impression. People do talk to each other, and her response was perfect because she didn't yell back. She didn't make a scene. She just repeated his own words back to him and let him figure it out. Yep, that one was completely self-inflicted. Okay, the next story is called "My Friend Posted My Work on Social Media and Claimed It as Her Own." And this wasn't just about someone stealing credit for a nice photo. The original poster actually needed that work for her professional portfolio, while her friend was using it to advertise herself. And yeah, the update on this one is pretty satisfying. The woman who wrote this was 22 and had recently moved to a different state. She'd already completed cosmetology school once, but because licensing requirements were different where she now lived, she needed to complete some additional hours. So she went back to school for a while. That's where she became friends with another woman who she calls Mindy in the story. Mindy was a little older, around 32, but the two of them seemed to get along pretty well. During the poster's final week at school, she had a client coming in for a pretty dramatic haircut. It was going to be a big change, and she really wanted to take some before and after photos. Not just because it looked good, but because she was about to start applying for jobs and needed strong examples for her portfolio. The only problem was that she was running late that morning and had accidentally left her phone at home. So she asked Mindy if she could take the photos for her and send them over afterward. Mindy agreed, took the pictures, and the poster assumed that was that, except the photos never showed up. A few weeks passed, and the poster asked Mindy about them several times. Sometimes she didn't respond at all. Eventually, when the poster explained that she was actively applying for jobs and really needed the pictures for her portfolio, Mindy apologized. She said she'd been busy, promised she'd send them soon, and then another 2 days passed. Still nothing. Which is already kind of weird. I mean, sending a few photos takes, 30 seconds? Then one day, while scrolling through Instagram, the poster saw something familiar. Mindy had uploaded the before and after photos of that exact client, but instead of crediting the person who'd actually done the haircut, she wrote the post as though the work was hers. She used it to advertise herself, telling people to come to her if they wanted their hair done, and this wasn't some random hairstyle that happened to look similar. It was the poster's client, her haircut, and the exact photos Mindy had promised to send her. Yeah, that wasn't a misunderstanding. The poster was obviously angry, but it wasn't only about being denied credit online. She was trying to build a professional portfolio. Those photos were proof of her skills, and Mindy had been withholding them while using the work to promote her own career. At first, the poster wasn't sure how to handle it. She wondered whether she should confront Mindy directly, ask Instagram to remove the post, or go back to the school and explain what had happened. People advised her not to confront Mindy before saving everything, so she took screenshots of the Instagram post, the caption, and all of the messages where she'd repeatedly asked for the photos. She also reported the post through Instagram, so Mindy wouldn't be able to quietly delete it and pretend it had never happened. Then she contacted the cosmetology school, which, was absolutely the right move. Get the screenshots first. Always. The next day, She went to the school and spoke with the academy director and the director of admissions. Both of them took the situation seriously immediately. Apparently, this wasn't the first problem they'd had involving Mindy, so they weren't exactly shocked. They checked the schedule from the day the haircut happened. It showed that the poster had been assigned to the client, while Mindy had been working behind the front desk. And people working at the front desk weren't even allowed to perform services on clients. So there was no realistic way Mindy could claim that she'd done the haircut. The client was actually a newer student at the school, so the directors called her into the office too. They showed her the Instagram post and explained what had happened. She was pretty annoyed as well. Not only had Mindy claimed credit for someone else's work, but she'd also posted photos of the client without asking for permission. The poster asked the client if she'd be willing to write a short statement confirming that Mindy had not been authorized to use the photos. The client agreed. She also gave the actual hairstylist permission to use them in her professional portfolio. Once the school had the schedule, the client records, the screenshots, and the written statement, the directors contacted Mindy, and suddenly, after weeks of ignoring messages, Mindy became very responsive. She apparently got scared that legal action might be involved and started apologizing, not directly to the person whose work she'd stolen, of course, but she apologized to the school. The Instagram post disappeared within about 2 minutes, and shortly afterward, the original photos were sent to the director of admissions, who finally forwarded them to the poster. Funny how quickly people find the time to send something when consequences appear. At that point, the poster finally had her pictures back. She had permission from the client to include them in her portfolio. The false Instagram post was gone, and the school apologized for the entire situation. They even offered her a free service of her choice. So she decided to get a massage. Honestly, fair enough. After all of that, I think she'd earned it. But the story still wasn't quite over. The directors also contacted the salon where Mindy was currently working. Her boss was informed that she had publicly used another stylist's work to advertise herself. At first, the poster was only told that Mindy's boss planned to have a very serious conversation with her. So she waited to hear what would happen next. Then the academy director called her again. Mindy's employer had reviewed the evidence and decided that plagiarism was completely unacceptable. She was told to collect her belongings and leave. Mindy had been fired. So yeah, she stole one haircut for an Instagram post and ended up losing her job over it. All right, so I don't really feel bad for her. This wasn't a case of forgetting to tag someone or getting confused about who took the photo. She knew exactly who'd done the haircut. She'd agreed to take the pictures for her friend, kept them for weeks, ignored every request, and then used them to attract clients for herself. That's pretty deliberate, you know? And if she was willing to do that with one person's work, her employer probably had to wonder what else she might claim as her own later. I do think getting fired is a serious consequence, but in a profession where clients choose you based on your portfolio, taking credit for work you didn't do is a huge trust issue. People weren't just liking a random photo. They could have booked appointments and spent money because they believed Mindy was capable of producing that result, and she wasn't, at least not based on those pictures. So, yep, I think the outcome was deserved, and I'm glad the poster didn't confront her before collecting the evidence, because Mindy almost definitely would have deleted everything. Okay, let's go to another story. This one is called, I Force Wells Fargo to Mail Me a Statement That Will Always Be Zero. It's a very small form of revenge, but the person behind it has kept it going every single month for almost 2 years. And honestly, the amount of commitment involved makes it much funnier than it probably should be. The person who wrote this explained that their father had worked for Wells Fargo for more than 20 years. He worked on the call center side of the company and managed a team responsible for predicting how many calls each center would receive so the company could schedule the right number of employees. Basically, it was his job to notice staffing problems before they became serious. At the time, the company was having trouble staffing its overnight shifts with employees in the United States. To solve that problem, it opened a call center in the Philippines, where the difference in time zones made covering those hours much easier. According to the poster, that arrangement worked well at first. The team in the Philippines handled the overnight calls, while the American centers continued operating during their usual hours. But over time, the company began moving more and more of its call center work overseas. The poster's father repeatedly warned management that closing the American offices too quickly would eventually create serious scheduling and staffing problems. He understood the call volumes. He understood the schedules. And he could see where the plan was heading. But his warnings were ignored. Eventually, the problems he'd predicted started happening. The company ran into major staffing issues, and the person who'd spent years warning them about exactly that outcome was laid off along with the rest of his team. After more than 20 years with the company, that was how his job ended. Yeah, I can understand why his family might have held on to a little resentment after that. The poster also had a Wells Fargo credit card, but they didn't want to close it immediately. It was their oldest line of credit, and they were worried that canceling it might affect their credit score. So instead, they moved every recurring payment and subscription onto newer accounts at a local credit union. The Wells Fargo card stayed open, but there was no longer any reason to use it. While updating the account, the poster noticed one more setting. Their statements were currently delivered electronically, but they could switch them back to traditional mail. So that's exactly what they did. Every month, Wells Fargo now has to prepare and mail a statement for a credit card that hasn't been used and has a balance of exactly $0. At the time of writing the post, this had been happening for almost 2 years. Month after month, another envelope arrives. The account is still open. The balance is still $0, and the bank is still mailing the statement. Honestly, this has to be one of the smallest acts of revenge I've ever heard. It probably cost the bank almost nothing, and I'm sure nobody working there is personally bothered by it. But that's not really the point, you know? The point is that every month, somewhere inside the system, another completely unnecessary $0 statement gets printed and mailed because one person decided not to let the grudge go. And I kind of respect the consistency. It's also harmless. Nobody's being shouted at. No employee is being targeted. And the poster isn't doing anything dishonest. They're simply using a delivery option that the bank itself provides. So while it might not be the most devastating revenge in the world, it is strangely satisfying, tiny, inconvenient, and apparently permanent. Anyways, I've got a bit lost at this village, but I've decided to take these jack-o'-lanterns to make some atmosphere near my house. We'll see how it goes. But all right. Let's get into the next story. Okay, this next post is called "My Mother Has Been Selling My Eggs." And the strange part is that the person who wrote this was completely fine with it at first. The problem started when the chickens stopped producing as many eggs. They asked their mother to stop giving them away, and their mother apparently decided that wasn't really their decision to make. About a year earlier, the poster had bought 12 baby chicks. They built a large outdoor run and a proper coop by themselves, raised the chickens from the time they were tiny, and continued handling most of their care. The hens were allowed outside regularly so they could move around and free range instead of spending all day inside the coop. Basically, the chickens were very much their project and their responsibility. At one point, the poster had to travel overseas for work and was gone for around 4 months. While they were away, their mother took care of the chickens. She fed them, let them out in the morning, and put them back inside safely at night. The poster hadn't given her a strict routine to follow because the hens were fairly easy to care for, and everything seemed to be going well. When the poster returned, they found out that their mother had started selling the extra eggs to family members and friends for about $3.50 per dozen. At the time, that wasn't a problem. The chickens were producing more eggs than the household could use, so the poster didn't mind the surplus going to other people instead of being wasted. Their mother had also looked after the birds for several months, so the arrangement probably didn't feel especially unreasonable. But after the poster came home, they started using a lot more of the eggs themselves. They usually ate 4 eggs in the morning, and they also baked regularly. So eggs were an important part of their meal planning. On top of that, they were now down to only 5 adult hens. Some had been lost to health problems and predators, and one of the remaining hens had gone broody and stopped laying. At that point, the most they were getting was around 4 eggs per day, so the surplus wasn't really a surplus anymore. A couple of weeks earlier, the poster's mother had asked them to save 3 dozen eggs for one of her friends. The poster agreed, but they also explained that they couldn't keep doing this afterward because there simply weren't enough eggs being produced. They asked their mother to tell the friend that the regular supply was ending, and she agreed. So, as far as the poster knew, the boundary had been clearly understood. Then, the mother came back and said that the same friend wanted even more eggs. The poster told her there was still 1 extra dozen she could give away, but after that, they couldn't keep setting eggs aside for other people. The night before everything happened, there were roughly 2 dozen eggs in the house. Some were already packed into cartons, and a few more were sitting in the collection basket. The next morning, the poster went into the kitchen to make breakfast. Every egg was gone. They checked the cartons, the basket, and the usual storage areas, but their mother had taken all of them. Not just the 12 they had agreed she could give away. She'd taken everything, including the eggs the poster had been saving for their own meals. Yeah, no, I'd be annoyed too. At that point, it's not really about a few eggs. It's about being asked to stop and doing it anyway. The poster tried calling and texting their mother because they were upset and wanted to know what had happened. They explained that the eggs were part of their meal plan, that the hens weren't currently producing enough to replace them quickly, and that taking all of them after being asked to stop wasn't okay. Their mother didn't take that well. She said the poster had no right to tell her what to do, accused them of overreacting, and said she would simply buy eggs from the store if they wanted them that badly. Then she hung up and stopped responding to the messages. That response doesn't really make sense to me. If buying eggs from the store was such an easy solution, then she could have bought some for her friend instead of taking every egg from the house. And the poster wasn't suddenly changing the agreement for no reason. The number of hens had dropped, production was lower, and they had already explained all of that. You know, being allowed to give away the extras doesn't mean you permanently own every egg the chickens produce. The poster later added some context that made the situation a little more complicated. Their mother was in her 70s and had moved in after retiring and going through a cancer scare. Her health had improved, although her mobility was still limited. The home was located on a larger piece of family land that the poster and a cousin had been developing into something like a small family compound. So this wasn't a situation where the poster wanted to throw their mother out or completely cut her off over a carton of eggs. They loved her and were very aware that their time together was limited. They just wanted her to respect one fairly simple boundary. After the argument, the mother began giving the poster the silent treatment. The poster briefly considered getting more chickens, but they were hesitant because that would mean more work, more responsibility, and more animals to protect. They also started thinking about putting a separate lock on the nesting boxes. Because the existing lock only protected the entrance to the run and coop, then the situation became more serious. The poster noticed that one of the hens was limping and found puncture wounds on another. They learned that while they had been working at another property, their mother had let the hens out to free range without supervising them. A fox had gotten into the area. 2 chickens were missing, and the remaining birds had apparently spent more than an hour outside after the attack before anyone realized what had happened. At that point, the poster decided their mother could no longer be responsible for the chickens. They changed the combination on the lock and told her that she wasn't allowed to let the hens out or manage their care anymore. They knew that decision would probably make their mother feel incapable or excluded, especially because caring for the chickens had given her something useful to do. But after losing 2 birds and finding others injured, they didn't feel that they had another choice. The poster still didn't want their mother to feel as though she had nothing to care for. They considered getting her an older cat or helping her foster animals instead, as long as it was something safer and easier to manage. Even after everything that happened, the poster was trying to balance protecting the animals with protecting their relationship with their mother. And honestly, that's probably the hardest part of the whole situation. So I don't think the poster was overreacting. She was fine with her mother selling the eggs while there were plenty available, and she only asked her to stop when the circumstances changed. That seems completely reasonable. The mother also could have asked before taking everything, or bought eggs somewhere else for the friend who wanted them. Instead, she ignored the request and then acted as though the poster was being controlling for wanting to use food produced by their own chickens. And, oh my God, the part about the fox? That actually made me so angry. Like, yep, you want to feel useful and have a little side hustle. I get it. But putting helpless animals in actual danger because you're too proud to listen? Nah, that's where I draw the line. I do understand why the poster feels guilty, though. Setting boundaries with an older parent can feel awful, especially when you know they're dealing with health problems and they want to feel useful. But remember, guys, loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to ignore every limit you set. Sometimes the kinder choice in the long term is still the one that makes both people uncomfortable right now. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Was the author overreacting, or did the mom totally cross the line? And with that, I think that's where we'll leave the stories for today. It was a slightly quieter Minecraft adventure this time, but we explored the area around our new home, found a village, spent a little time there, and made it back with a few useful things. I'm not completely sure where we'll head next. Maybe we'll keep exploring, or maybe it's finally time to go looking for some diamonds. I guess we'll figure that out when we get there. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like or subscribe. It's completely optional, but it really does mean a lot. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.